When persuading and planning of the Western railroads had finally been completed, a really challenging task remained: the dangerous, sweaty, back-breaking, brawling business of actually building the lines. The men who took it on comprised the most cosmopolitan work crew in American history. They included Civil War veterans and freed slaves, Irish and German immigrants, Mormons and atheists, sophists, socialists, Portonites, Washos, and wiry little Chinese who drank boiled tea instead of doubtful water, and who brought along and also paid their own cooks. Well, I'm not entirely sure that this history book is the best written history book out there, but certainly an interesting one. History, you know, history. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Campaign Creator. My name is Guy, and today we're looking at history and the history of your world and timelines. Now, before we get going, this episode is brought to you by World Anvil. I even got a t-shirt. By worldanvil.com, the world aggregator of choice that we use, and you know who they are because we love them so very much. Worldanvil.com has brought today's episode to your screens. So thanks to World Anvil for that. Now, if you don't know what this is, Ghosts of Saltmarsh is a D&D campaign that I will be running for Dungeons & Dragons on the Dungeons & Dragons Twitch channel, twitch.tv/D&D, starting on the 25th of May at 1 p.m. Pacific time or 8 p.m. UK time with an international cast. It's going to be a lot of fun, so put that in your diary as something to watch if you want to have a look at the Ghosts of Saltmarsh. That's the new adventure book that's come out from Dungeons and Dragons. It comes out 21st of May. Links down below if you want to go and pick up a copy from Amazon and help support the channel. Now, let's look at history. History is something that you don't need a lot of in your campaign world because the only person who cares about it is you. And yet, history can be incredibly powerful and an incredible motivator and inspirer when it comes to creating adventures and giving you options of exploring things that perhaps you hadn't considered before. So we're going to spend today looking very briefly at history, and importantly, we're going to look at how to use the timeline feature that will allow us to track historical elements, that would be elements, elephants, and events. So we're going to be tracking those three creatures through our timeline to see where exactly we end up. Now, using a timeline, I find, is incredibly powerful to allow you to visually see what happened when and how those influenced other things. So we're going to head on over to World Anvil to do our timeline, and you can choose whatever program you like to do your timeline. You can even draw it manually by hand if you so choose, but there is a nice little timeline function here which we are definitely going to make use of. So it's called Timelines. Let's go and have a look at the current timeline that we have. The creation of the sphere. That is the only timeline that we have. That is the very first one. So we have our option to create new timelines here. We're not going to do that. We're going to go and look at the creation of the sphere. Let's have a look at this timeline very, very quickly. And there it is. The Emergence, a celestial event. The world is born. And we can have a look and see what that says there. The world of Gaia is forged by the sphere's interactions. Millennia pass after the elements create the rock and waters. During these millennia, nature, life, logic, and blood combine to bring about life. Death ensures the cycles. Finally, void and time begin, allowing for Gaia to breathe its first breath. And there's the creation of the sphere that takes us through to the religions. We don't want that. Let's go back here. So we've got this timeline. This is the Emergence. This is our ground zero. What's important to bear in mind with ground zero? Creation myths are incredibly important in almost all cultures. Whether it's the creation myth that a quantum brain wobbled and the entire universe popped into existence through a terrifically loud bang, which no one could hear because as we all know, there is no sound in space, and since space was being created at exactly the same time, there was definitely no sound for the space to happen in, because there was no space for the sound to be in, and all those kind of wonderful things. Whether it's that sort of thing, whether it's turtles all the way down, whether it's gods ripping off bits and pieces of themselves, or doing all kinds of weird sexual things and creating everything out of that, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is that cultures have them, and they like to use them as rules, as regulations, as moral compasses, compassi, as moral direction, and it's something for you to include in your timeline. So your timeline should start at 0. Now there is nothing stopping you from jumping forward 20,000, 2 million, 2 billion years forward. There really is nothing stopping you. Now what I have done, however, in the world of Gaia is that we have the spheres interacting. Time is the last sphere that interacts with the space. So whilst there is no time sphere, time happens inside of these spheres at random events. It could be that billions of years pass, it could be that hundreds of years pass, it doesn't matter. So when nature sphere starts to kick in and starts to run everything, when the life sphere starts to run everything, I should say, we could go through the dinosaurs, into mammals, into something new. We could have dragons being turned into unicorns, being turned into kobolds. That is an evolutionary step that I would love to see how they work that one, since kobolds, lizardmen, and dragons all supposedly herald from the same stock, or at least kobolds dragonborn and dragons do. I would like to see that branching evolutionary train to understand how that happened. It could be quite interesting, like the hyrax and the elephant of today. Nonetheless, we have our emergence point, and then we can jump forward. We can skip forward. So we're going to create a new historical entry. And this is an historical event, and we're going to call it the First Empire. Now, this often happens, the First Empire. When we look at history, history shows us that we have empires that rise and then fall, and then a few years later another one rises to take its place, and then it falls and rises and it falls. And we have this constant cycle that flows as a result of humanity. Before humanity happened, we had these epochs, these massive periods of time where nature was having an empire of species rise up, get obliterated, disappear, and then another one rise up, get obliterated, disappear, rise up. And it's happened 6 times so far, with a 7th one on the way in terms of mass extinctions. So there are these cycles, whether it's in nature or whether it's in a human context. So if it's in a human context, these are shorter time frames, sometimes 100 years, sometimes 1,000 years. With elves, I would imagine that it would be thousands of years. And that is where we now have to pause and reflect. When you have long-lived species, whether it's in a science fiction environment or whether it is in a fantasy environment or a modern day environment, if you have a long-lived species, you need to take into account how fast does that species operate. Elves traditionally have always been fairly lackadaisical in their approach to governance and life. They take a lot longer to do things. They really like to get stuff right before they move on and innovate. So in terms of an elvish empire, it might be that the empire is 20 or 30 generations old, which would put it somewhere in the region of what? Almost 10 to 15,000 years old. That's a long time. We haven't even had that as a species yet in terms of our written history. So, at least the written history that we have found. So that's a long time. It's not that long on a geological scale. So there could have been an entire civilization of humans that rose up, left to a different planet, came back again, and started the current human race on planet Earth within the time frame between the dinosaurs and now, and we wouldn't have any evidence of them. 65 million years, according to science, has transpired in this time, and there is nothing that we as humans have created thus far that will still be detectable in 65 million years. How sad is that? So the idea is that there could have been a civilization that rose up, disappeared, and died in the space of 20 million years, and we still wouldn't know about them. We discover them, the Atlanteans, or perhaps even earlier, the Lemurians, or even earlier than that, something different, who knows. The point is, if you put in one of these historical moments, be prepared to use it. Let it simmer and sit in the back of your mind. And what I would totally advise is what I'm about to write now, thou writest no more than. In other words, it should be a sentence or two that sits in the back of your head so that when your adventurers are busy going through a cave or they are exploring a temple of some kind and they find a mural on the wall that looks very old and one of them does the history skill check pass thing, you sit there going, it's a relic, you think, from the First Empire. And the players go, what's the First Empire? You don't want that. So you want a sentence. You want enough that you can give to your players that gives them a hint of something. Once they've taken the bait, once they've gone, oh, I want to find out more. I'm going to the library to research this. I'm going to go and look into this. Once they've done that, now you can start to expand. You're going to come back to this historical entry and go make new article, and you can then write about the First Empire. So we're going to keep it short because there's no point in doing more than we absolutely need to be able to get away with enough convincing for our players to bite and then to get ready to go in for more. There is no point in writing 20 pages of history on the First Empire if the players are never going to explore it. If you have someone who's got a history skill and you say, oh, you see this ancient mural, it depicts this massive battle between, it looks like giants and dragons. And they go, I put it in my bag. What? It's a priceless piece of art. Yes. Priceless means like 5,000 gold. I put it in my bag. I'm taking it with me. Then you haven't wasted any of your time. So, an introduction to this entry. The First Empire was a proto-empire consisting of the Dan Hara people. Dan Hara people. Spread across 80% of Gaia and was destroyed in a freak magical accident of unknown origin. Done. Full context. The Dan Hara people look like elves, but stand nearly 12 foot high. They wear heavy armor made of adamantium or long flowing robes imbued with raw magic, rumored to be exceptionally in tune with the power confluxes of the spheres, known for enjoying mind games and hating violence. There we go. That's pretty much it. Timelines. It's the creation of the sphere timeline. There's no related article. There's no related location. Chronology. When did the First Empire start? I'm going to say it started in 3 UDT or UTD, Universal Time Date. It was 3 years after. And when did it end? I'm going to put there, let's say, 6,734 years. So it lasted for around about 10 generations of elves and then ended. Okay, now this is the part that I particularly like, and something that you won't have in any other programs as far as I know. We can choose the event type. So is it celestial? Is it a civil action? No, it's not. It's not a disaster. It's not a dismemberment. It is an era. Perhaps it could be an era. Let's see what else we've got. Metaphysical, political event. You could argue it's a political event. I think we're going to go with era. It's an era. The first empire was an era. So I'm going to put here era, beginning and end. Okay. Event significance. How important was it? Well, if they controlled 85% of Gaia, it is of global importance, the first empire. That was destroyed. And we're not going to worry about anything else there. So we're going to create this historic entry. So let's now go and have a look at our timeline. I'm going to bounce back to the timeline. There it is there. Let me just see if I can click on it and stop it from going. Yes. So now when we start to have a look at our historical timeline, we can see how it's starting to be populated with different events, different things happening. And we can see very quickly the first empire. There's a little bit of a descriptor of it. If I want to know more, I can click on here and I can go into it and read a little bit more. But again, I don't need to go further than this. We can see that it started 3 to 6,734 on the standard timeline. So that's all that we need to do. And I think that's really powerful. Now, if we create another event that is not of global or celestial importance, we can create other events. They're going to have different icons. Let's do that very quickly. We're going to create one more event. So 6,734. Let's create a catastrophe. 6,375. We're going to call this the Sundering. The Sundering. A massive discharge of power from the 8 spheres around Gaia causes most of the Dan Hara elves to die in an extinction level event. The reason for the discharge is rumored to have been caused by a misalignment of the spheres owing to the unbound nature of worship that the Dan Hara engaged in, believing the logic sphere to be the most important sphere. So they believed in the logic sphere too much, so they pushed all of the other things out of alignment. So boom, this giant switch, this giant thing happens, causing this massive event. This event started, we said what did we say? 6,375. So I put that in the wrong place. 6,375. I'm calling this the Sundering. The Sundering, and then here I should just fill in the Sundering is an extinction level event where the Dan Hara elves of the first empire are obliterated. Right. Okay, good. And we come down here. We said 6,375. I did write that in, didn't I? Did I? I hope I did. Yeah, 6,375. When the year it didn't end, it was just an event. Now, this was a disaster destruction. Importance level, it was of national importance to the Dan Hara anyway. No one else cared. And so we're going to save that, create that historic entity, and we can work through. Now, again, as I say, you don't want to put in thousands of entries. You see that's giving us a different symbol. So I like that. It's very easy to be able to bounce through and see what happened. As this timeline populates, it gives you the opportunity to drop stuff in and to add to it, which is also something that I particularly like. It allows you to then, whilst you're sitting there going, okay, so you come across this marble sculpture of, it looks like this very tall elf. Okay, a history check. Oh, these must be the Dan Hara, part of the First Empire. Who was the First Empire? You don't know that. You can go and research that. Now we go here and we go, right, let's add into the article even more information. We can unpack it even more and take it from there. So we're going to drop in history. We don't necessarily need to drop in the history of every single race, where it came from, those kinds of things. The historical entries that are relevant to us are things that excite us, things that make us go, ooh, that's cool. That's cool. When did the hegemony form of the kingdom of Utherios? When did that form? Well, let's create that one very quickly. This is the last one. This is just an example of where do these things come from. So this is the formation of the Utherios hegemony. The hegemony was founded by three mothers. Let's say three mothers known as the Great Scolding, the Great Sacrifice, the Great Sacrifice. It brought into alignment the great city-states that now form the hegemony. Okay, and then we can go into it. Three mothers of three sons watched in horror as their children killed one another in yet another inter-city-state war. In protest, the three mothers summoned the leadership of the great cities to a site now lost to history, or the GM can use this as an adventure option, whereupon they set themselves on fire using gnomish green flame, and to this day remain burning alive as a living testimony to the atrocity of war. Their great sacrifice was so shocking that the leaders of the cities united under a single banner, the banner of the hegemony of Utherios. That's pretty bleak, but at the same time it is something significant. I think that's pretty damn cool. So that's creation over there. This, I think, we're going to put at 9,000. So I set the date 0 to wherever. So 9,000 is the date that this happened on, the founding. There was a battle that would have taken place. Now, this was a civil action, could be. It was a founding, that's what it was. And this is of national importance for Utherios anyway, no one else, so we're going to create that. And I think the bottom line is that you can have fun doing this, and you can go, oh, let's have a look at the timeline. That's pretty cool. I like how it's growing. I like how it's developing. We can see the First Empire. That was 6,734. Then there was the Sundering. So then from 6,374 to 9,000, what happened in those 3,000 year gap? What is in there? I don't know. We can unpack that. We can add more to it if we want, or we can move on and say, well, 9,000 is when the Aetherios hegemony started, and then our actual current date is 9,000 or 10,000 or 11,000 or 12, doesn't matter. So we can see this idea and jump in when and as we need to. So this is how we're going to do it. This is what we're going to carry on doing. We're going to carry on populating. We're going to come back and we're going to populate it as the characters interact with other races. We can come in here quickly and drop that information in so that we're keeping track of where we're going. And so for those pesky history checks, you can add this in. It also informs you. You walk down the streets and you can see there's this ancient building. It doesn't look like it fits architecturally with anything else. It seems older than that. Oh yeah, that's one of the last outposts of the First Empire. They, they all died, but their buildings remained. And this is one of their buildings. You can see the level of technology that they had. We don't have the magic anymore to light it, so we use traditional candles and flames. But I mean, there are rumors that there are crypts down here locked away behind magic illusion spells so powerful that we couldn't find anything. You're welcome to have a look around though. Bingo, adventure, launch, plus a bit of history, all inspired from one little entry. So that really is the power of the timeline, in my opinion. Have a look at it, make your timeline, make your historical entries, but don't make them any more complicated than they need to be, because the only person who cares is you. So until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of campaign creation. Okay, I think you're going to like this. But an engineer did not reach his lofty estate simply by aspiring to it. Kai Warman described a painful apprenticeship. As an aspiring young man, he began as a wiper, working a 12-hour shift in the roundhouse where he massaged the internal parts of some engineer's beloved locomotive with wads of greasy waste. The pay was $1.75 a day. A wiper could become an engine watchman whose job it was to keep water in the boiler and enough of a fire going to move the locomotive within the railway yard. So not even getting out onto the open tracks yet. Now, I'm sure he didn't like that, but he subscribed to the system because, as we can see, in 1854, when he was 5 years old, a construction train came rumbling across his father's farm in Pennsylvania, and that got him to want to become an engineer. Now, after he had done that, he heard the bells. He heard the bells in 1871, where he started his career, and it would be for 4 decades as an engineer on the west of the Missouri. Now, that, I think, is absolutely dull.